I'm sorry, but I think we actually do need cognitive tests for U.S. senators. Like, what the fuck is this?
Why is Israel, another country, your red line right now, this is what your critics are saying, rather than a domestic issue that impacts Americans' everyday lives?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with a lot of Democrats, too. And then when you migrate into these extreme kinds of views and embrace the kinds of people that should really be considered toxic. So, of course, I'm entitled to my opinion. And if you're proud to campaign with those individuals, great. That's really up to them. I called trash Plattner. I called that he is a real problem. And now why people seem to be okay with it. Why was
If you feel like you're missing context in what he's saying, you're not. If you're feeling confused, you're right to be. There are only 100 U.S. senators. There are only 45 Democratic senators, representing 350 million Americans. If you add those 45 Democratic senators, plus our 2 independent senators, that's 47 individuals. There are 47 individuals in the Senate right now, out of 350 million Americans who are trying to fight for human rights and protect human rights domestically and abroad. And he's one of them. That fucking bumbling idiot.
I'm going to take this one further. I don't think that we should have a cognitive test for senators. I think that we should abolish the Senate. Maybe you've heard all the Fox News hosts and establishment Democrats clutching their pearls over the DSA platform that includes a plank for abolishing the Senate. And that might sound really, really radical, except you guys, to the founding fathers, it wasn't. And if we actually look at what it means to be a representative democracy, abolishing the Senate isn't that radical at all. After all, that creator just said there are 100 overwhelmingly wealthy, privileged individuals who are casting votes supposedly on behalf of 350 million of us, although overwhelmingly they are casting votes to benefit their own stock portfolios and also the dark corporate and foreign money, billionaire money that runs them. So, let's unpack this abolishing the Senate a little bit. But just in case you need another gentle shove, shove, not push, another gentle nudge to consider this whole premise and why it might be important, let's just add a little bit more context from Senator John Fetterman.
Why does Israel get to decide?
Well, the defining question is, does Israel engage in a genocide?
Yes.
In Palestine? Well, according to the people that define those things, yes.
Okay, well, and I strongly disagree with that. By definition, that wasn't a genocide.
What?
The Jewish community actually experienced a true genocide for that. Now, if Israel's goal was to eliminate, as many Palestinians as possible, they could have accomplished that in a lot long time ago. For that, they were not engaging in a genocide.
Just because you're killing a group slowly doesn't mean you're not killing a group. Just because you could do it faster.
No. That was the terrible the collateral, of an urban war that forced Israel to fight behind because Hamas was holding their hostages and refused to disarm and send our people back home.
I think they've killed like 1,200 Palestinians since the ceasefire.
Yeah, I mean, most of them were killing Hamas leadership. And I think that's necessary.
First of all, Jon Stewart, thank you for your tremendous patience in that interview. I hope everybody goes and watches the whole thing. But also, before we can get into this issue of abolishing the Senate, I have to push back against one of Fetterman's talking points that he clearly took from, a piece of Israeli propaganda. This framing that the only real Holocaust or genocide that has ever happened is the one that was committed against the Jewish people in World War II. That is simply not true. The Germans committed the Nama and Herero genocide before World War II. The Germans modeled their Holocaust after the United States government's genocide against indigenous people here. There are so many other larger, more massive genocides and holocausts that have occurred around the world throughout history. There is a Holocaust happening right now. Elon Musk has launched it by gutting USAID. He will kill 14 million of the world's poorest people. So no, I cannot allow that talking point to stand. What Israel is doing to the Palestinian people is a genocide. But that really highlights the fact that John Fetterman is bought and paid for by Israel. We have senators, and he is just the most kind of like overt about it. And I also think because of his disability that he gets made fun of a lot more because he's less slick in the way that he's able to articulate his support, his unwavering support for Israel. But he's by no means alone in the Senate. He's actually in the majority when it comes to Congress in both political parties, that staunch support for Israel over human rights, over the well-being of both the Palestinians but also the American people, over representing the American people they choose to represent a foreign government. And this isn't the only instance, right? We already know that so many of our elected officials, especially in the Senate, are bought and paid for by corporations. Look at both Senator Padilla and Senator Schiff in California. They had huge contributions from big crypto to their re-election campaigns. And you might be like, Angela, don't pick on them. They're the good ones. They voted for Donald Trump's corrupt crypto bills, two of the most corrupt pieces of legislation that have come through in my lifetime. They had to vote for them because they don't represent what is best for their constituents. They represent what the mega corporations want. So you have this tiny group of folks, 100 individuals who have tremendously outsized amounts of power and influence, and corporations are able to leverage that influence. They don't have to buy very many folks at all, just 100, actually just 51 of them. So while we see the establishment absolutely freaking the fuck out over this DSA plank that we should abolish the Senate, if we really examine the power of the Senate and the way that it is a hindrance to representative democracy, and if we look at what our founding fathers had to say about the Senate, they gave it as like a concession, but they were like, this is not great, right? House of Lords, House of Commons, we really should just have a House of Commons. We should have a massive expansion of the House of Representatives, because already we see that there are members of Congress who represent 200,000+ individuals. They are meant to represent small cohorts, but we have not expanded Congress the same way that the population, at the same rate that the population has grown. There have been a number of pieces out in the last couple of weeks from a diversity of sources, some that I would not expect. There was a piece in The Atlantic by Jonathan Chait, I want to talk about that in just a second, and a piece in Jacobin talking about how, yeah, maybe abolishing the Senate would be good for democracy. It would stabilize our government. And I want to reference here a piece that came out in Slate by Rob Gunther on July 31st. It is entitled, Let's Abolish the Senate. And it is discussing this Atlantic piece. And like, wait a minute, a centrist pundit is agreeing with the DSA on this. Let's examine this some more. I found this piece really fascinating because Chait is somebody who has historically called the DSA anti-democratic, and yet they're in agreement on this issue. And I think it's important to understand when we look at this question of should we abolish the Senate, is it not good for democracy? Is it denying us adequate representation as the people? I think that there is a really important point that we need to center in the conversation, that abolishing the Senate is incredibly unlikely to happen. It is, there's a snowball's chance that it's going to happen. I think one of the reasons that the DSA has put it on their platform is to open up conversations like this. I also think it's totally fine to put things on your platform that are like a reach for the stars. And in an ideal world, this is where we're hoping to go, and this is what we're hoping to accomplish. We should be able to have a theoretical conversation about this without freaking out, but I understand that they are spinning this on purpose to make the DSA look incredibly radical, even though it is not something that is going to be accomplished anytime soon. If ever, it would be a huge lift. And by they, I mean not just Republican Fox News types, but also centrist Democrats, also the Democratic establishment, the third way folks, the folks spending $15 million and trying to make sure that Abdul El-Sayed, not a DSA member, just a progressive Democrat, and also DSA candidates don't get elected. It's infighting. That's real infighting. I'm always talking about how we have to be able to dream of something different before we can build it. We have to envision a radically different future before we can craft the plan and enact the steps to get us there. So I think it's a really good thing to talk about what would it look like to have representation, to have a US government without a Senate. What would it look like for us to abolish the Electoral College? What would it look like for us to expand and reform the Supreme Court and add term limits? We can and should be having these conversations. We should not just accept accept the status quo as what is best for us because it has gotten us here.